Ethan Brooks is hiking a remote forest trail when he trips over something metal, a small fireproof safe chained to an old tree stump, covered in moss and rust. He spends an hour smashing it with rocks before giving up and calling his locksmith friend. The next day, they finally crack it open. Inside are 47 engagement rings, each tagged with a woman's name, a date, and the words, "She said no," or "I chickened out." Ethan Brooks had been hiking for about 2 hours when his boot caught on something solid. He stumbled forward, barely catching himself. Looking back, he saw a corner of metal poking through the dirt and moss. He knelt down and brushed away the debris. The object was a small safe, chained to an old tree stump. The metal was rusted, covered in years of forest growth. He pulled at the chain, but it wouldn't budge. The safe was locked, with just a corroded keyhole visible. Who would chain a safe to a tree in the middle of nowhere? He started hitting the safe with rocks. For nearly an hour, he smashed stones against the lock and hinges. Nothing worked. Frustrated, Ethan pulled out his phone and called his friend Marcus, a locksmith. Marcus was skeptical, but agreed to meet him there the next morning. The next morning, Marcus arrived with his tools. He examined the lock and worked methodically for 40 minutes. Then, with a satisfying click, the lock gave way. He gestured for Ethan to open it. Inside were dozens of small velvet ring boxes. Ethan opened the first one and noticed a tag attached to the ring. It had a woman's name in careful handwriting, Jennifer Morrison, April 12, 1987, and below that, in red ink, the words, "She said no." He opened another box. Different name, different date, different ring. This one said, "I chickened out." They opened more boxes, finding the same pattern. 47 rings total, each tagged with a story of rejection or fear. At the bottom was a leather-bound diary. The cover had a name, Gerald Finch, with an address in nearby Millbrook. The diary spanned decades. Gerald had been a jeweler who started collecting these rings in the late 70s. Some were returned from broken engagements. Others were custom-made but never used because buyers lost their nerve. Gerald kept them all, preserving each one with its story. The entries grew sadder over time. Gerald wrote about his own failed relationships, his fear of rejection. He'd planned to open what he called the Museum of Lost Chances. But the final entry, dated 3 months ago, was different. Gerald wrote that he'd turned 83 and realized he'd wasted his life collecting misery. He was leaving the safe in the forest, chained to the stump where his father had proposed to his mother in 1952. Maybe someone brave would find it and make people happy with him. Ethan took photos and loaded the rings into his backpack. That evening, he posted the story online with photos of the diary and rings. He asked for help tracking down the people mentioned. The post went viral overnight. Within a week, Ethan had located 31 of the women whose names were on the tags. Most were in their 50s and 60s now, living different lives. He called each one and explained the situation. Some laughed, barely remembering the failed relationship. Others got emotional. 3 told him to do something good with the rings, but 6 rings had men's names on them. These weren't returned rings. These were rings that had been purchased but never used because the buyers never found the courage to propose. Ethan tracked down 4 of those men, all now in their 60s and 70s. The first was Robert Hayes. When Ethan explained about the safe and the ring, Robert went silent. Then he started crying. He told Ethan he'd been dating the same woman, Patricia, for 42 years. He'd bought the ring in 1983, planning to propose on Christmas, but he'd gotten scared and returned it to Gerald's shop. He and Patricia had stayed together anyway, just never married. Ethan asked if Robert still wanted to propose. Robert said he'd been thinking about it for 4 decades. That's when Ethan had his idea. He announced a second chance ring giveaway event. Recently engaged couples who couldn't afford rings could enter a raffle to receive one of the 47 rings. Completely free, they just had to attend in person and share their story. 200 couples applied. Ethan rented the community center in Millbrook, where Gerald had lived his entire life. Local news picked up the story. Ethan also tracked down Gerald Finch himself, alive and living in a nursing home outside Millbrook. He visited and told him everything that had happened. Gerald held one of the rings, turning it over in his hands. Then he said he'd like to attend the event. On the day of the giveaway, the community center was packed. Ethan told the whole story, reading from Gerald's diary. Then he started the raffle. Each couple shared their story and received a ring. But then Ethan called Robert Hayes to the stage. Robert walked up slowly as Ethan gave him the ring he'd abandoned 42 years ago. Patricia was sitting in the front row, confused. Robert knelt down in front of her and said he should have done this in 1983. He told her he'd been scared back then, but he wasn't scared anymore. He asked her to marry him. Patricia said yes. The room erupted. Then the second man who chickened out came forward. Then a third. All 3 elderly men finally proposed to their longtime partners using their original rings. All 3 heard yes. Gerald Finch sat in the back row, tears streaming down his face. A reporter asked him how he felt. He said it was the happiest day of his life. He'd spent 70 years collecting sadness, but it only took one person with hope to turn it into something beautiful. The remaining unclaimed rings now sit in the Millbrook Historical Society with Gerald's diary in a display called the Museum of Second Chances. And here's the question for you. If you found something filled with other people's regrets, would you have the courage to transform it into joy?